Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the special business meeting for the District of Squamish on Tuesday, October 8th. We're meeting this afternoon on the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. Hasquallowan, please look them up, Squamish, Owamayo. I have to say, the other night, MLA Ma said her greetings so well, and we need language lessons. So that's all I'm going to say about that. Motion to adopt the agenda. Moved by Councillor Herford, seconded by Councillor Stoner. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. This is a quick meeting, but let us do the first three readings of the permissive tax exemption bylaws. Now, a number of you have conflicts as we go through this. So let's be clear, and maybe Ms. Klassen can help us figure out which organizations are in each of these bylaws.
Yes. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Linda Clausen. I'm the Manager of Financial Operations. Today we're bringing forward 5 permissive tax exemption bylaws for Council's consideration that would exempt certain properties from property tax as allowed in Section 224 of the Community Charter. The permissive tax exemptions are also known as a PTE program. It's an annual program where the bylaws must be adopted on or before October 31st. For a tax exemption for the following years. Council must also give notice of these proposed bylaws. The first notice was advertised on October the 3rd. The PTE exempts all agency taxes for the bylaw period. Staff brought forward the PTE recommendations to the Committee of the Whole on September the 30th, and these bylaws are a result of the direction received from Council at that time. Upon review, we have found an error in the report. And you'll see a handout of the blue page. The value of the PTE for the golf course was incorrect. As per the agreement, the golf course should be paying $45,000. Therefore, the value of the PTE is the remaining $34,907. However, the good news is that the bylaw that we drafted is correct. The report is incorrect. And the result of this is I'll have to run another advertisement for just the golf course bylaw. The total estimated PTE value for these bylaws is $239,712. Total value of the District of Squamish PTEs that are out there, if these are approved, will be about $300,000, $306,000. Okay. The bylaws have been organized to accommodate known conflict of interests that were declared at the Committee of the Whole meeting on September the 30th. The bylaw 2700 is for 3 years and includes the Alano Club, the House Sound Women's Center, the Royal Canadian Legion, and the Sea to Sky Nordics Club. Bylaw 2701 is for 1 year and includes the BC Lions Society for Children, the Squamish Senior Citizens Home Society, and Squamish Helping Hands. Bylaw 2707 includes only the Squamish Valley Golf and Country Club. 2708 includes the Sea to Sky Forest Center Society. And bylaw 2709 includes the West Coast Railway Museum.
All right. Council, any questions? And if not, then motion to entertain the first of the bylaws. Councillor Pagil, is that moving bylaw number 2700, seconded by Councillor Stoner. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Somebody move the next one, bylaw number 2701, moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Race. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. The next up is the Squamish Valley Golf Course. So
we are going to deal with it?
Yeah, we're going to go in order.
Okay. Well, I'm declaring conflict. I'm a member of the Squash Club, which is part of the same taxpaying entity.
I'll also be declaring a conflict. I am a member of the Curling Club and a recent director, and they come under the fold of the Golf and Country Club. Thank you.
Oh, Councillor Anderson. The next one up is bylaw number 2708. So do you want to also?
For convenience, yes. I'll at this time also declare a conflict for the next item, number 4, Sea Sky Forces Center Society, as I've been a recent director.
Thank you. So someone to move bylaw number 2707, moved by Councillor Herford, seconded by Councillor Stoner. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. Councillor Race can come back in.
Just a process, Ms. Classen said we have to repost this, we can do that reading and then still repost it, or?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
it has to be advertised twice before it's adopted.
Councillor Race, I've now just tuned into why you wanted to know the order we were doing these in, because you're gonna have to get up. It's good for you to walk though, so. Good for all of us, I would say. Extra exercise. Okay, bylaw number 2708 for the Sea to Sky Forest Center Society, moved by Councillor Pettengill, seconded by Councillor Herford. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carried. And then you want to declare a conflict and then bring Councillor Anderson back in?
For the West Coast Railway Association?
Yes.
Yes. I'm declaring a conflict in that one. I am a member of that society.
Thank you. All right, someone to move bylaw number 2709, moved by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor Herford. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. Bring Councillor Race back in. Thank you. Thank you. Next up, we have District of Squamish Traffic Bylaw number 2200, 2012, amendment bylaw number 2681, 2019. Has it been given first 3 readings? If there's no questions on this one, council, then motion to provide readings. Councilor Pettengill?
So I did have a question, although my numbers aren't on it, but it talked about permitting construction and not just maintenance of roads as being delegated. I just wanted to check if that was, you know, like a major brand new road that can be approved or permitted.
Is there staff speaking to this one? In the room?
What's the section?
On page 12 of the staff report, that's project information. Currently, section 8.1 of the traffic bylaw delegates numerous permits, including to permit the construction or maintenance of roads.
So does that refer to a brand new road, construction's brand new? Like a maintenance piece I get, but I was just wanting to understand the construction piece, what that entailed.
Through the mayor, yes, that could be construction of a whole new road. It could be an upgrade of a frontage for a property. It could be a service connection or forest, putting a line under the road. It could be many things.
So just in terms of checks and balances, would we have another stage in the process where we're deciding? Because to me, a big new road seems like it could be a big deal. Like there will be steps before that, or
Through the chair, yeah. There are 2 ways that new roads would come, 3 ways. It's either a rehab, which is part of the rehab budget. It's a capital project, Pioneer Way is one that comes to mind. Or the other way that they can get in is through subdivision, which doesn't involve it. And that's statutorily established through the legislation. That's the way that the subdivision process works. So council doesn't have a role in that. The role is through the zoning.
Is there a particular concern you have, Councillor Pettengill?
it just struck me, and I'm not necessarily sure it's a problem, but it struck me as sort of out of line in terms of scope of something where we're delegating authority that could have a significant impact, where I was just trying to understand in my head if this is in line with the other things we're delegating or not.
Mr. Larson?
The control over the budget is the appropriate place for that, and it's there whether it's a rehab project or whether it's a capital project. The staff don't have our own budget. We don't create our own funds, so we need those funds from you to do any of that work. So council's control is exercised at the budget levels.
Okay. I saw your hand, Councillor Anderson.
Yes, on Cleveland, in front of the Zephyr Cafe, there's an example of a structure that is permitted to use a parking spot. I wondered whether that might be encompassed in the first bullet point here to license sidewalk cafes and sales areas, or would that be a different type of permission?
No,
Or would
that
that would be encompassed in that bullet point I cited?
Yes.
May I ask, what about the example we discussed last week of a loading area? We discussed this in connection with the development application at Cleveland and 2nd. Utilizing, designating a certain part of the, maybe I should state my interest is the general context of a parking strategy. Those two types of permissions would be encompassed in here.
Yes.
Okay. But should at some time we come to address a parking strategy, then your role would take that into account in managing these
Yes. Yeah.
applications.
That's correct.
Thank you.
One of the questions I had for staff is that through the bylaw and even in the staff report, it has delineation of responsibility in general manager. There's a list of bullets, and then it says director of major projects, or municipal engineer. And it's like there's a title missing there, director of.
Director of Engineering, perhaps?
Oh, I believe that the
And in the bylaw itself, in section 2 sub C, it says the same thing. Municipal office official means in relation to a permit issued. And under C, it says, under section 8.3 and 8.4, the director of major projects, or the municipal engineer. It seems like it wants to say director of engineering.
director, the definition under section 2.1 is the director of engineering. So that is the way that it's defined.
Okay. So we get to be called the director. Okay.
So for clarity on that point, we're delegating authority to the director of engineering, director of major projects, or any municipal engineer?
That is correct, yes.
One of the pieces of oversight I was curious about is the ability of construction sites to use our roadways. And if there's, can a municipal engineer approve that, or only the director level? In terms of, if you need it for a day, I could see a municipal engineer approving that. If you need it for 10 months while you build the whole building, is that a more of an oversight decision?
Any of the three are empowered or authorised through this to deal with it. They're the ones that deal with it on a day-to-day basis. They're the ones that understand what's going on. They understand the application. It best resides with the people that are dealing with that on a day-to-day basis.
Councillor Stoner?
I appreciate the efforts to delegate, and I agree that often those who are working on the front lines and have direct understanding of the projects often know best, but I'm just curious about the overall oversight of all of those delegations. Who is responsible for the cumulative impacts of all of those? So whether it's on traffic management, and if there's multiple people that are approving road construction and road maintenance and multiple parking spots over here, who has oversight of what's being done?
I can respond through the chair that just to be clear, we have at the moment 2 municipal engineers. And so it's not that we have dozens of people who are running off and doing things. And in fact, they are largely responsible for different neighborhoods. So a single municipal engineer oversees the entire area and the interaction between, for example, the downtown. There are many different construction projects and a lot of interactions between them. And we meet and discuss, especially when something difficult is coming up, like all the work on 2nd Avenue recently. We've had extensive meetings internally and with other departments and everything. At the end of the day, we have multiple permits, we require, there's an overall construction mitigation strategy and an overall servicing agreement that lays out the multi-year plan. Every time that the developer doing the construction needs to make a change, needs to say, okay, I need to do this for 3 weeks, okay, now I'm going to shut down this lane for a week, then that's a separate permit. And so the municipal engineer who's responsible for that project is managing that and is putting out the permits as required and making sure that they have the traffic management, et cetera, in play. But that's done within the larger context of everything else going in. And ultimately, that employee reports to me, and so any sort of competency as far as are they doing a good job of what they've been delegated to do comes back to me and my responsibility, and ultimately up the chain of command.
And continuing on that, the general manager retains the ability to make orders and amendments to approvals by others. So the accountability, if Mr. Wickham's not catching it, then I will, and if I don't, then I will have my boss to report to.
You don't want that. Sorry.
But if that is getting elevated to Ms. Glenda's level, then we have not done our job properly.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Everyone move first two readings, moved by Councillor Rafe, seconded by Councillor Stoner. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And then we have the District of Squamish Subdivision and Development Control Bylaw, which has come with a number of changes. And so I'll give council a chance to answer any questions unless you have a presentation to make.
I do have a presentation,
Okay.
which will hopefully answer some questions for you, if need be. All right. Hi, I'm Devin Kinaga. I'm a municipal engineer, and I'm here to present bylaw to amend the Subdivision and Development Control Bylaw 2649 with recommendation that District of Squamish gets first 3 readings. So for a kind of quick background, the engineering department is actively working on a substantive change to the current bylaw. We anticipate completion in 2020. Through the process of updating, we have identified some changes that we feel are important enough to implement sooner, hence the amendment bylaw. So I hope I'll give you some examples of some of those changes. In terms of the types of changes, they range from simple changes such as typos, reference errors. Speaking of a typo, for those who are reviewing the bylaw itself, the very first point, 2A, has a typo. It should say means a roadway that does not provide through traffic and services less than 20 residential, commercial, industrial, or institutional units. It says industrial twice, so we'll change that before signing. So these are simple changes that are fairly straightforward, but it's important that we capture these, tie these up to small errors, ensures clarity and, more importantly, validity of the requirements. These are not items that are typically argued, but it's just good practice to capture these. So, another type of change would be clarity. So improving clarity leaves less or no room for misinterpretation, results in more efficient application of the bylaw, less back and forth with designers, less room for error, and therefore higher quality end products. Speaking of efficiency, another type of change is more administrative in nature, and that's specific to improving the efficiency of administering the bylaw and specifically administering the service agreement, which is the agreement between us and developers for them to build infrastructure for the district. And then finally, we have quality changes, which is essentially providing infrastructure that performs better, lasts longer. And I'll give some examples. So there's 21 changes proposed. Of those, most of them are fairly straightforward. There are 6 that I figured that I would like to focus on that are a bit more substantive in nature and might raise some questions from yourselves. So the first one being clearly defining a requirement for developers to pave to the halfway point of their road along their frontage. This is a pretty standard requirement of ours. However, it's not specifically called out. So our current bylaw requires upgrading of the road, which includes paving, but it doesn't specifically call that portion out, whereas it typically does call everything else out, curb and sidewalk, gutter, the need to handle storm if you're filling in a ditch, that kind of thing. So it's important that for clarity purposes, we can speak to the specific need to actually pave to the halfway point. And this is only if necessary. If the road is in great shape, we don't get them to tear it up and pave it unnecessarily. The second change is, this is more of an example of a quality change. There are certain types of connections that we use to connect to our sanitary system. One is called an inserted connection. We don't like these connections. They've caused us problems in the past, and we see them as a lower quality solution. So by specifically saying you are not allowed to use these, it improves the overall quality of the end product. It is something that it basically makes official something that we've already been applying, which is that we don't typically approve inserted connections. And the next one is a big one, or a very important one. It is ensuring that all the stormwater runoff from a development must meet the quality guidelines, or rather must meet all federal, provincial, and municipal regulations and guidelines. So our current bylaw requires it to meet all regulations. However, federal and provincial regulations are actually very different. And so what happens is it falls to municipalities to regulate them. So we need the ability to regulate to something, and the guidelines are what actually speak to water quality. So the feds and the provincial government don't really enforce on the level that we need them to protect our own more local waterways. And so this is really important again. This is actually something that was in our previous bylaws and was unfortunately omitted on the last update. So this is kind of catching something that we missed. But we feel that it's very important to get this in now, not wait, another however many months it is.
So is it really still a guideline? Like, we have a document where it's called a guideline, but it's actually a rule now as opposed to a guideline?
Correct, yeah. So the problem is the federal government can't regulate it because it's called a guideline, but we can say their guideline is regulation under our bylaw. So moving on, the next example, the next key change is related to efficiency, and this is administrative in nature. So currently, the general manager needs to sign off on specific documents that are related to the servicing agreement. So things like the permission to construct and certificate of substantial performance. Typically, the general manager does not have the level of detail of knowledge required to really be able to sign off, or not be able to sign off, but the responsibility really falls on the district engineer to know what's going on and to understand whether it's appropriate to sign off on these documents. So I'm badgering the general manager enough with, making sure that everything is in line. Then to have to bring a document again for signing is just kind of extra onerous. So these changes remove this bottleneck and simply improve the efficiency of administering the actual servicing agreement and the bylaw itself. The next change is also an example of quality, which is specific to pedestrian safety. So if anyone has ever pushed a stroller or a shopping cart or been in a wheelchair and tried to cross driveways where the driveways are typically at a steeper grade to a typical sidewalk, it's not great. It pushes the gravity wants to pull you into the road. Best practice is to keep your sidewalk at the same grade all the way across. You might have letdowns, but they don't also tilt at the same time. So we don't have it as an official requirement in our bylaw, so this is something that we want to make official, and it's a simple change, so we decided to put it into this amendment bylaw.
Can I ask a question somewhat related to that?
Sure.
And I've heard this from seniors downtown, is where we upgrade, or a developer does, the sidewalk and the curb letdown for people crossing the street. But then because the pavement doesn't require upgrading, they end up with a lip.
Okay.
So you go from the pavement, so if you have a stroller or a walker, you run into the new curb.
Yeah.
Before it goes up the letdown, and can be quite abrupt. And so seniors were asking me, is there anything we can do to make sure that if those new curbs go in, that they're flush with paved road,
Yep.
if the road didn't get
That is something that absolutely we should be catching at the construction phase. From a design perspective, it should be flush. That's just best practice. So we need to ensure that we capture that at the construction phase. And as you've probably seen on sidewalks too, where as sidewalks heave and crack and you get tripping hazards, will come, rather than replacing the whole panel, come and grind it down. That's just part of general public works operations. So yeah, that's definitely something we should be catching.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, and then finally, the next one is to improve enforceability. So right now, if you're working on site, you have the BC Building Code and legislature around that to stop work. So our building inspectors can stop work for various reasons. We can't do that for offsite works. So this is specific to work that is occurring on district property, and that's a problem. So if we have issues of safety or environmental concerns where you have runoff running into the ditch, we have certain abilities to obviously encourage contractors and whatnot to behave, let's say, and fix that. However, we don't have the actual ability to just stop work. And this is more of a last resort, kind of a heavy hammer. However, we feel that it's very important for us to be able to do that for both safety reasons, not even immediate safety concerns, but in immediate to the construction work, but for example, dust issues, health concerns related to that, as well as environmental concerns. So we don't have the ability unless it's in our bylaw, and so we want to place this into our bylaw sooner than later. So those are the key changes. I'm going to switch gears a moment because I know environment is in front of people's minds right now. So I wanted to just briefly update on where we're at with regards to environment. So in 2018, we updated our bylaw, and we did actually, there's a few key changes that I just wanted to highlight. One of the items that we did was we improved the clarity of storm water management requirements. So it wasn't, if you opened up the old bylaw and you were trying to figure out what was required of you as a designer or as a developer, it wasn't very clear. It didn't say front and center, you must do this, X, Y, and Z. Now it does. So that was a good improvement we made in 2018 that we are going to refine going forward as well. Another key change that we made is we updated our intensity, duration, and frequency curve to consider climate change. So this speaks to how much rain falls at what rate for a given return storm, 2-year, 5-year, 10-year, so on. So what we've done is we've updated that to include climate change, and that's made all the numbers go up. So what it means ultimately is that we're now designing our storm infrastructure to take into account added rainfall because of climate change. So it's an adaptive change essentially to the climate change issue. And then finally, some of the ISMP recommendations that came, some of the recommendations that came out of the ISMP, a lot of them were actually addressed by the 2018 update. And I don't think that that was conveyed because they were reviewing under the 2015. They were happening concurrently. So I just wanted to bring up a point that a lot of the recommendations were addressed, and whatever is remaining, we are addressing going forward in the 2020 update. Now, I'm guessing that there's some thoughts on the 2020 update and questions around that.
So just, sorry to break in, ISMP is the Integrated Stormwater Management Plan.
I actually had that written out, but my apologies. So going forward in 2020, some of the key items that we're looking at from an environmental perspective are material selections. So looking at possible alternatives to high impact materials such as, say, concrete versus asphalt. There might be options or situations where we want to deviate from what would be considered an industry standard because it is better for climate change or for other environmental considerations. We're looking at different opportunities when updating our stormwater management section again. With regards to climate, there's the possibility of various green infrastructures. Right now, we don't require developers to build specific infrastructure. We just have performance targets for them to meet. We may want to start requiring a certain direction in one way or another. The other opportunity is with regards to quality. So specifying actual performance targets for quality. We're doing that with the amendment bylaw, but we might want to get actually more specific if we can to the specific Squamish location. And so that's something we're investigating. Water conservation is another item that we're looking at to reduce water use, obviously, then reduce energy for pumping. And that's through low flow irrigation systems. Erosion and sediment control is another one, tightening up controls. A good example of this one is products that are out there for reducing erosion issues, so to protect the environment, sometimes involve rolling materials out on slopes. But those products, and they use things like coconut fibers and green products, which is great. But the problem is they're sandwiched between plastic mesh, and that plastic mesh degrades over time, and then it's almost impossible to pick it all up. So it just seems backwards if we're trying to protect the environment using stuff that then, therefore, or in turn could harm the environment. So we're looking to tighten that up on our end as well. And then finally, going back to the integrated stormwater management plans, we're getting into the catchment-specific management plans. And so we will be doing our best to add wording that allows us to adopt or incorporate the recommendations under catchment-specific ISMPs without having to come back to you for updates to the bylaw. So, yeah, ideally we can capture all that. If not, we may have to do an amendment. So in summary, this is about the amendment bylaw. So I apologize for this aside, but I hope that answered maybe some questions that you might have had going forward. So in summary, with regards to the amendment bylaw, there's a variety of different changes, 21 in total. Most of them are fairly straightforward, and I feel like I've highlighted the key items. Just a reminder, we are we are working on a more substantive update, so we'll be back in 2020 with a much more thorough update of the law. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
Yes, under engagement, due to the nature of these many small changes, public engagement is at IAP2 level of informed. I wonder if you could just describe what is the communication routine for informed. Do you, for example, advertise that the bylaw has been amended, or can you also get in touch with the Sea to Sky chapter of the Home Builders Association? Or do you have a focus group of key developers that are useful for communications about such changes? And what do you plan to do for the substantive update as regards engagement in 2020?
Sure, through Chair. So yeah, we have an email list essentially that goes out to anyone and everyone we know in the development community that works in Squamish. So we would send an email informing them of these changes. As you pointed out, or as you mentioned, the changes are not substantive enough, in our opinion, to warrant a full third-party review. However, in 2020, with the full review, we certainly will be sending that out for third-party review, which is what we did in 2018 as well, and it gave us a lot of good feedback that we used in making those changes.
Thank you. So you do maintain a database that can serve as a focus group for your work?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have one, maybe this is related to the 2020 update, but we've now included natural assets in our asset management plan, and so does this bylaw have a place where we can help to protect those or draw developers' attentions to that, or does it really belong somewhere else?
Yeah, through you, Chair. Yes, it certainly does. I don't know what the wording will be. We've flagged that as a key item to look at going forward as a
Anything else? All right, thank you for your presentation. Councils, moved by Council Race, seconded by Council French. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you both.
Does the motion include the amendment?
Oh,
It's okay, but this is
that part's good. Okay.
Okay.
The motion included the amendment. Correction. Sorry.
Correction to the amendment. Amendment. Okay. Robin says we're good, so we're good.
Okay, that was it for the open portion of our meeting. Motion to close. By Councilor Burns, second by Councilor Pettingale. All those in favor? Close. Motion carries.